Welcome everyone to this extraordinary opportunity to share in the conversation about the art of Li Hongwei. The title of the exhibition this time is Master of Innovation. And hopefully it will provide us with a number of opportunities to explore his own life's journey, but also the work itself as it is included in this present exhibition, and also to engage with some rather extraordinary people who have agreed to share this platform with us, all of whom have spent a good deal of their lives dealing with art, and dealing with art in the zone that Hongwei and his art does inhabit. So I think it's a really remarkable opportunity to begin to think about and ask about the question of how does one begin to think about or identify talent and potential. I spent 57 years looking at, on average, 300 to 400 portfolios a year. And I would think that I've made a substantial number of mistakes in that process, but at the same time, have always been excited by the energy, creativity, enthusiasm, and talent, as well as many instances, the wisdom of the creators themselves. And in selecting work and choosing to exhibit it at the gallery, we've had an ongoing underlying principle that once we commit to somebody, we commit to them and their art. So the gallery is not involved in what they create. Our job is to simply create for that work that they have created an audience, an understanding, and in many instances, a conversation around what they've done. Hongwei is a really unique experience in our 57 years. When Tao was nice enough to send me a note and ask if we would look at the work, I was hesitant because by that time we only had 16 ceramic artists in the gallery and close to 3,000 works in ceramics. So it wasn't as if we needed another artist working in clay. But I must say that from the very outset, there was a moment of delight, and I would use the word from Brother Thomas, astonishment, when he wrote some time ago, skill and art are not the same thing. The only real measure of art is astonishment. And I must say, Hongwei, when I saw your work for the first time, there was certainly that aspect of being astonished by what you brought to the gallery on that day. And through your work, also the sense of who your wife are, is in the wholeness of the experience. So for that, I'm very grateful. I'm also grateful to one and all who have agreed to have this conversation with us. And as we start on the screen, and I ask each of them to speak, I'm going to ask them to, if it's okay, to talk a little bit about how they came into connection with Hongwei's work. So let's look first at the cover of the catalog. On it, a piece that certainly dominates the space in our gallery, and we have 13-foot ceilings. This is an extraordinary piece, and certainly goes along with the title of a Master of Innovation. We're going to come back to it in a bit, but what I wanted to do was to start with Hongwei's journey and to ask Hongwei in the next slide to begin talking about his own biography or autobiography and what brought him from the outset to today. Hongwei?
Hello, everyone. I'm Li Hongwei. Thank you for Bernie's great introduction. This piece put on the slides was made way early, probably 18 years ago, when I was in graduate school at Arfid University. Right after I graduated from CAFA, I came to the United States. So this piece called The Weight of Meditation. So still I used to make clay figures, realistic figurative sculpture. And this piece was in a transition from that kind of very realistic sculpture to become a kind of abstract one. So I made this pagoda shape start from my self-portrait, and I finished by Raku. So that's the earlier piece I start. And yeah, and let's see, if anyone can give me some comments or if anyone have any question.
How did you know Hongwei's work or at this point, or was it much later?
Sorry, your question is for me, Bernie?
Yes, I was saying, did you know his work when he was
No,
creating it?
I did not meet Hongwei when he was at Alfred University. When he started, but when I met him, he was still there, but as a teaching fellow. He already graduated from the program. And just by pure chance, I actually got to see his work then. And then actually the first thing struck me is as you saw in the cover of exhibition, not that one, but it's already beginning as kind of very abstract kind of a ceramic production or artwork. So I began to ask Hongwei, said, "Oh, could you show me your other works?" So then I began to have some understanding of his early works, like this one. This one is also one I like very much. I think Hongwei puts really rightly like his transition from a very fictive into more abstractive works. So the works then I acquired for the Art Institute of Chicago is one of his more abstract work, allegory to the balance. So that one, I think there'll be a slide later on you can see. And then maybe come to then I can tell a bit more of why I thought at the time was important work for the museum collection. But yeah, I think I met Hongwei when I came to Chicago around 2015. I think probably met him in 2016.
Perfect. Bob, this is very different than the work that you and I basically have known of his. And can you respond to it in the context of your own background? And also talk a bit about your coming in contact with Hongwei and his art.
Well, excuse me, I first encountered Hongwei, if you will, through his art, through his glazed ceramic vessels. I don't know which year I saw the first one, but it's at least 10 years ago and maybe more, at an art fair in New York. And I was astonished by the brilliant color of the yellow glaze and the blue ginkgo leaf patterns that decorated the piece. It was something new. The blue and yellow color are traditional in certain later Chinese ceramics from the Ming and Qing periods, that is from the 15th century onward. The color at first seems a little, combination of colors seems a little unusual, blue and yellow. But it was blue and white ware, yellow was the imperial color. And so it meant that such pieces were destined for the imperial palace. But nonetheless, so even though I was familiar with the color combination, Li Hongwei's colors, the blue and the yellow, were quite vivid and very striking. And so that's the way I first encountered Li Hongwei, and then eventually came to meet him as well. This particular sculpture, which is quite interesting, on the one hand, it's a human figure, obviously, the head, the shoulders. But what strikes me, and I don't know whether it's coincidental or Hongwei can answer this better, it reminds me of a Chinese or a Japanese pagoda. With the shoulders of the figure that extend laterally, are almost like the extended roof and eaves of the pagoda. And of course, it rises like a pagoda, and in the case of some pagodas, the upper ones are smaller than the ones below them, and so that may be coincidental. But whether coincidental or not, it has many associations with traditional Chinese art, as well as being something very new that we see here. And it's a very interesting antecedent to his later porcelains.
Absolutely. And Andrew, I don't know if you've ever spoken about or written about these earlier works, but I'd love your take on it, and also sort of your coming into the world of Hongwei or Li Hongwei.
Yes, thank you. Well, when in 2006, 2007, I spent a year in China on a Fulbright fellowship looking at contemporary Chinese ceramic art. And at that time, I sort of approached it as a Japanese ceramic historian from the perspective of, if China has the world's greatest ceramic tradition, why is it that in contemporary ceramic art, China sort of lags behind many other countries, such as Japan? There must be fantastic contemporary ceramic art in China. So I went to Beijing to try to find it. In the course of investigating, I discovered some of the reasons that I had heard very little about contemporary Chinese ceramic art, and that was because of a lot of logistical concerns, the lack of workshops and facilities available to people making ceramic art. Most people had to be connected with universities and didn't have the freedom to really expand their horizons in terms of innovation techniques and that sort of thing. So I was really kind of disappointed at the end of that year. But lo and behold, several years later, I think it was actually through the Pucker Gallery originally that I was introduced to Hongwei's work. And it had progressed beyond the slide that we see here. But Hongwei, by being trained technically in China at the Central Academy of Fine Arts, and then going to Alfred University in New York, and sort of having his own vision expanded, and it was during that time that this piece was made, was really able to make that leap from the generally quite traditional art-based approaches that I found in China in 2006, 2007, and really become more abstract, more conceptual in his work, as we see already happening in this piece. Hongwei, this piece dates from around when?
2006.
2006. So at the very time that I was in China, Hongwei was in upstate New York, embarking on his journey to becoming the really amazing artist that he is now. But you can see, as Bob and Tao have shared, you know, it's not a self-portrait. It is a self-portrait. It's not a self-portrait. It's more than a self-portrait. And, you know, it's really beginning that journey of expanding his horizons in terms of the possibilities of ceramics as sculpture.
Thank you, because that was, and in a certain way, what happened when Hongwei came to the gallery. We can look at the next piece now and move on just a bit. Because the gallery, for the most part, has been involved with vessels. And we're going to look at a few of the vessels using both the blue and yellow glaze and then the green glaze with crystals as part of it, and then see the continuing addition, if you will, to his visual vocabulary that not only starts with the vessel form and the beautiful use of the porcelain, but then the introduction of stainless steel, which we saw on the first piece as well. So Hongwei, if you could speak just a bit about this particular piece in the Mei form, and we'll be looking at 2 or 3 pieces in essentially this inspired by the same form, and then move on.
Okay, so when I made the sculpture, back to the time when I was in graduate school, I made all those porcelain vases on the side because as a sculptor, I used to just make sculptures, but I really loved those porcelain, especially for this crystalline glaze, the surface. I had this enthusiasm, to fire those pieces. So that's a piece fired later, but so you will see, those two works, big difference. So sculpture and vessel forms, I work them separately, but that's at the same time. So this is a vessel form from traditional Chinese mapping vase, but slightly more toward the Song Dynasty when you look at the form, the shape. And I did play with the crystalline glaze, but kind of for the shape of crystals, the size of the crystals, and the quantity of the crystals, even the rhythm of the crystals on the surface. For each factor, I can control about 80%, and 20% relies on God's hands. So to me, a good vessel form or crystalline glaze vase doesn't mean there's no cracks, but the size, the shape, the quantity, the rhythm of the crystals have to be very interesting and have to be see something. And I think the criteria is that my judgment is the beauty of the piece. And I think that's how I fire those porcelain vase forms.
Tao, when you saw his work, did you see the vase forms as well as the sculptural forms?
Not first. First, I saw Hongwei's sculptures, and then I visited him at his studio in Beijing. Back then, I saw quite a number of his so-called vessels, and then I realized that he's actually working on both paths. One is very abstract sculptural kind of representation of some kind of we call conceptual art, or in conceptual art path. But the other way, he has kept the tradition alive by adding his own, I would say, a new technology. Because I think later on maybe Bob would say more about this glazing technology. Because then I learned that Hongwei actually invented a new recipe to create this kind of, he just described very interestingly, under control but out of control, which is how the art comes out from this ambiguity or something like out of control. So I think to me, that actually shows he's very open-minded. He's not just we defined as contemporary conceptual artist, but he's also, I wouldn't call traditionist, but he's also pouring inspirations from a tradition. So that's how I see it.
It's a lovely thought. There's a quote of Brother Thomas's that I use often, which is risking and dreaming are primary acts of creativity. And I think to achieve this addition to what we know as a traditional Mei-ping form, but put it in different clothing, if you will, creates a whole different experience of looking at the piece itself. Bob, you've seen both the sculptural pieces and this, and I think of them both as sculpture, but I'm more interested in your thoughts.
Yes, in a sense, the vessels are also sculptures, sculptures that actually can contain something if one wants, but they are beautiful sculptural forms as well. And in fact, some of the actual sculptures take their cue from vessels, so there's a direct relationship between them. I think the glazes are quite astonishing. As we've said, they are crystalline glazes. And while Hongwei didn't invent crystalline glazes, they were invented much earlier in the 20th century. What he has done is to be able to control the formation of crystalline patterns within the glaze. And I think one thing that should be emphasized is that in traditional Chinese ceramics, from earliest times, really right down to the present, that is to say, most traditional Chinese ceramics and porcelains, the decoration is either underneath the glaze, that is a clear glaze through which you see incised or carved decoration, or in other cases, molded decoration, particularly with ceramics up through the Song dynasty, that is to say, the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries. And then from the Yuan and Ming periods onward, from the 14th century onward, the decoration is often painted in underglazed cobalt blue underneath the glaze. So it's painted on the pot after it has been shaped and dried. Then the decoration is painted on in cobalt blue. The glaze is applied and it's fired. What is interesting here is not only the vivid colors, the control of the location of the patterns, the crystalline effect, but the patterns are actually in the glaze. In earlier times, they were mostly under the glaze, or there are overglaze enamels where the color, particularly bright reds, greens, and such, are on top of the glaze and are affixed in a secondary firing. But this is a new glaze type. Not only the color, the crystalline, but also the fact that the decoration is within the glaze. And so there is tremendous innovation, technical innovation, as well as aesthetic innovation in a piece such as this beautiful Meiping vase.
Carolyn, if we can look at the next image, and Andrew, if you would talk just a bit about this piece. And I remember when you were going to China, I asked you to look out for work that the gallery might be interested in, and it turns out that it came via Chicago.
Right, yes. One of the things that is so fascinating about Hongwei's crystalline glazes, and Bob obliquely alluded to it, is the fact that these patterns that look like they might have been painted or applied or something like that are indeed part and parcel of the glaze. It is a component of the glaze that covers the vessel. And what you see here, as in the sort of reflections that sort of remind you, sort of there in the center of old vinyl music albums, is in fact a actual light reflecting off of those crystals, so that when you rub your hand over the piece, you actually feel them. They're actually physically there. It's not a rendering or something like that, or a trompe l'oeil or something that you're made to think you're seeing. These crystals are actually physical, a physical manifestation of the glaze in that area. So you can actually feel their shape if you stroke the vase or rub your hands over the surface. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand until they see one of the works in person. The other interesting thing about it, in the previous example, we saw the really marked contrast between the yellow sort of base glaze, if we can put it like that, the primary glaze, and the crystals that formed in it, in the color of blue. Here we see sort of two complementary colors, a celadon-like green, which is not a true celadon, but is a copper-based green. And then these, again, vivid lime green crystals that are formed on the outside. In this case, not looking quite so much like ginkgo leaves, but as I said, sort of something out of maybe the Art Deco period of art history, where they're very bold and brash and stark, I guess. It was just a really wonderful piece.
So if we can look at the next detail that we have, Caroline, and have Hongwei just speak a bit about the delight, if nothing else, in the way the crystals are dancing.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this piece is the glaze are exactly the same as the green piece. So as you see, the copper glaze, for oxidation can produce green, reduction can produce red. So in this typical pieces, so you can see, green and red happened the same time in one piece. So I did the oxidation and the reduction together. Even they are the same glaze, you can see this, both of them are reduction, but on the left image, the background kind of dark, purple, red, and on the right one is pigeon gray background with the crystals. Those happened because of the different firing process. So the recipe, the glaze recipe is a major part, but the firing is more crucial. It's more important, how to control the fire, the firing rate, reading the temperature really fast and drop the temperature rapidly to release the heat. That's how those crystals happened.
Quite beautiful. One more of the Mei-Ping forms, and then we're moving on. But I just wanted everyone to have an opportunity to luxuriate, I guess, in the joy of the form itself, the simplicity and beauty of it, but also the dancing of the crystals across the surface. So, Hongwei, do you want to speak briefly about this, and then we're going to move on?
Yeah, this Mei-Ping still, so we put the 3 Mei-Pings here. They're all called Mei-Ping, but they're in different shapes. So that's from Song Dynasty, Yuan, Ming, Qing Dynasty. We have the Mei-Ping form, but in different shapes. This is more kind of like toward earlier time. And for the glaze, still this glaze is the same as the 2 close up you saw, but still a little bit different. On the top is more pigeon gray, but without more textures. But in the middle part of the piece, you can see the red dotted surface. So still happened during the firing. So on the top is more red. On the bottom is more kind of green, blue crystals happen at the same time.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the moon flask and have this wonderful example of the crystals and the yellow with it. Bob, I would hope that you could share your response to this one.
Yes, it's a very interesting shape. Hongwei mentioned that the previous vessel forms, that is the Mei-Ping form, originated in the Song Dynasty, and of course continues through the rest of the dynastic era. This particular form originated in the early Ming period, in the late 14th, but particularly in the early 15th century. It was done originally in white porcelain with a clear glaze, maybe a little inside decoration. But of course, such moon flasks were also painted with underglaze cobalt blue, so you have blue and white porcelain. So this is a very traditional shape going back to the early 15th century, a modern interpretation of it, but of course decorated with the wonderful bright yellow base glaze and the blue crystalline designs, which more or less recall ginkgo leaves, as we see here. Another difference from the traditional approach to decorating the ceramics, apart from these being abstract designs, which we don't find on traditional ceramics, is that there was a strong tendency in most earlier Chinese ceramics, particularly in the blue and white ware tradition, out of which this comes, even if the blue and white traditions are a little far away from this, is that there an emphasis on borders. Almost all Chinese ceramics have borders. Top borders, there would be a border around the circular main portion of the vessel, and probably linear borders on the handles as well. And that's something that transforming an older shape into something new, modern, and very beautiful, Hongwei has completely changed the type of decoration on a very standard old shape. Not only a new kind of abstract decoration, the way it is dispersed over the surface, but also the elimination of the traditional borders that would demarcate the edges of the piece. And so it's new, very new, and old at the same time in a wonderful combination.
Bob, you couldn't have done a better introduction to this quote from Brother Thomas that I had pulled out before, which is, what is old and beautiful is always new. And what is beautiful and new is always old. So let's move on, but I did simply want to say that the two of you were on the same page that moment. Thank you.
It's a wonderful combination. So often artists, in reworking something from the past, they are trapped by the burden of the past. Here, Hongwei has adopted elements from the past, but it's completely transformed them. So the past is a source of inspiration, not a burden to be labored under. And that's always a delicate balance when dealing with older forms or older motifs, whatever. Hongwei has done it masterfully.
Wonderful. I just wanted to show this particular form piece because there is one in the collection at the Harvard Art Museums that was presented in Bob Mowry's honor. And one of the nice things that they did, apparently, when it was first shown, was have a light shining into it with a mirror so that you could see the crystals also having opened up on the inside. Hongwei, do you want to speak briefly about that? And then we're going to move on to your shiny period of stainless steel.
Yeah, and this is called gourd vase. I did put the same glaze inside of the vase form. And so when you put a light from the top, you can see pretty much the same crystals as you see outside. But inside, the crystals in general will be bigger because during the firing process, it holds more heat than outside surface. So when you get a chance, I really encourage the audience to look inside of the piece. It's quite interesting.
So we're going to move on, and Tal, I would like very much for you, because here we're now moving into some of Hongwei's pieces that combines, if you will, the old with the new, or the new with the old, and the combination of the stainless steel and the porcelain and the crystals. But your thoughts in response to these works?
Right. Yeah, this particular object, I think it belongs to a group of things Hongwei made, probably after 2017.
Yes.
Right. I remember about that time, kind of Hongwei shared with me his ideas, and then I said, "Oh yeah, it's great," because really you starting from go back to the first piece and this self-portrait. It's something to do with the wheat and wheat of meditation. I think then he began to make an allegory of balance. And this one, I think, is something to do with the xuan, suspension. Yeah, it's that kind of I like this tension between the shape, because you got a very pointed space. You would not expect it can stand So actually at that time, I think we spent a bit of time kind of discussing how can you make this this
Make it happen.
form stand up. And I think Hongwei succeed in producing that particular shape, creating this tension, but at the same time a balance, which I think it's really a beauty, because again, you see some of his typical works, he combine steel and porcelain together. I mean, this is meticulously made, because if you look at the, I watched Hongwei doing it in his studio, and each piece is specially designed, made by hand. So they cannot just kind of come afterwards. It has to be really planned and then produced. And in this particular case, I can see Hongwei maintained his the characteristic of his work, which is this particularly glaze, crystal glaze, and the beautiful color, but very much in harmony with the steel. And the steel is reflective, which also bring people into different dimensions. And so I think this is a really intriguing piece. And it also, I do think it touched some on a more conceptual level, which is something I always find the strength of Hongwei's work. Also, it's actually a very big difference between him and other ceramic artists in China, because I think he really came out from the tradition and really made a breakthrough, and also has created his own language. I think it's very important to have his own language.
Absolutely. And the next piece as well, Caroline, Andrew, if you want to speak briefly about it, and also the photograph is very good, but I just encourage you to realize that actually there are 4 sides to this, as well as a sense of circularity at the top, so that it, many instances, reflects the old jade coin, which is circular and has a square center for heaven and earth. So taking a very old idea or visual idea and then making it into his own is really quite extraordinary. So please.
Yeah, this really sort of demonstrates what I was saying before, and also relates to the other comments about the weight of tradition and the difficulty of escaping from tradition when you're working in either a traditional mode or traditional forms or traditional decoration, breaking out of that traditional mindset that gave birth to those old works and finding a voice that is yours and that is contemporary, that expresses your own relationship with those traditional ideas. And so this work is very different from the vessels that we've been looking at, in that it really breaks away from that sense of tradition as a form, as a physical manifestation of culture, and here goes more to the metaphysical, as expressed in the title, the upwelling of gravity. You look for that in Chinese philosophy, you're not really going to find it, but yet this piece is emanating from Hongwei's knowledge of traditional Chinese concepts, as Bernie just mentioned, the circle and the square, the heavens and the earth, square being earth, circle being heavens, being expressed in this abstract way that is innovative, creative, and evocative, but doesn't have it has a conceptual connection to tradition. It doesn't have a physical connection to tradition. And beyond that, his taking, using or developing a technology that enables him to make what he has imagined come to life in the physical world by combining ceramics and metal in ways that really have never been done before is quite amazing.
So let me just share another thought of Thomas's, which is when you don't know something cannot be done, it makes it possible to do it. And I would say that certainly in this instance, I would never, and I assume the others of us, except for Hongwei, didn't think this could be done, but here it is before us. Next piece, please, Caroline. Hongwei, as they would say, what were you thinking?
Yeah, this so done. No, I call it done form. No matter what the title, I call this series. People still think about this egg form, and I think this. I have been working with this idea. For Chinese culture, the same pronunciation have different characters, Chinese characters. So this I call done. The same pronunciation we have. The other dan means the morning. 通宵达旦的旦, so it's the morning. And the rebirth, 诞生, still feel the same pronunciation. And this is the egg. So the same pronunciation share different meanings with different characters. I find it's quite interesting. So I play this idea to finish this form. And this there's a certain weight on the bottom of the piece, so it can dance, and but eventually can stay at the orientation I designed.
It's absolutely remarkable. And we're going to look at the next image as well, where it certainly has gotten larger. And if you want to talk just briefly about the combination of the stainless steel and the fragments that make up the center part of it, I think it would be helpful to everyone.
Yeah, so this steel, even I call the origin, you still think about this egg form. So the same idea, the shape suggests the pronunciation done, and still share the meaning of morning and rebirth. So it's called the origin, can produce anything later. So there's a concept of kind of yin yang. So we have stainless steel and ceramics. And for the ceramic shards, or broken pieces, so it's referred to broken, destroy, kind of that idea. Fragments, suggest destroy. But the stainless steel is a whole. So there's a contrast between the fragments and the whole. And the first ceramic parts is more fragile, but the stainless steel is more firm and strong. So there's a fragile and the hardness and the strong. This combination I find very interesting. So that's how I try to use a constructive way to create a piece, put them together to become a new whole.
Quite extraordinary. We're going to move on just a little bit because, as ever, we tend to lag behind. And Tao, this would certainly be a piece that you could speak about, in that the Art Institute has a piece from the same series, the Allegory of Balance with the 3 columns.
Right. I don't know. Is this one actually the same one we acquired?
Different one. Yeah, not this one.
Yeah, it looks a little bit different, but in the same series. Yeah,
Yes.
that's how kind of I began to kind of really seriously interested in Hongwei's art, because when I first saw this group, and then we actually talk about kind of why, because first I said, oh, it looks like I mean, you can refer back to his the first slide you saw, this piled up like pagoda, but here you actually reminded me of what you see in Tibet. People putting petals together, piling them up, and then to trying to create some kind of almost unthinkable balance. And that is a way of meditation, but it's also a way of the understanding of the word, and also a way to practice some conceptual, also conceptual exercise in Tibetan custom. So that's why I thought, oh, this is really interesting, because it's really to connect the past and the present, and also going to, as you can see, some of the forms are relate to or refer to the Song Dynasty mapping, but some of them just like a pedal stone. And then you got this very interesting, beautifully balanced and combined together. So I thought it's a really interesting, unique work. That's how I acquired that for the museum, and now it's permanent in our collection. And then we have put it out a couple of times, and obviously attract a lot of attention and admiration from our visitors, because you can stand in front of it for quite some time, trying to work out, and also you can see yourself in that. And this is got this kind of interactive, almost like a magic to this object. I think Hongwei may be able to say a few things about the different combinations, because sometimes he makes them as one single, like a single object, and this is what we call grouped objects. And this combination, to me, is also very interesting, because they seems kind of give us another insight into his thinking. I mean, how does he using some conceptual ideas, sometimes philosophical, sometimes it's not quite philosophical, but still trying to turn them into an artist expression. That is something really attracted me. Yeah, and maybe other people see it may have different reaction to it.
I totally agree with you. I think I would call this the trio, and the single ones are solo performances. But Hongwei, if you would talk about the 3 columns and then the single column in this pursuit of the allegory of balance.
Okay, yeah, so I start from the single column, but I think the 3 columns is quite different. So, you know, back to the time when I made sculptures, I still made the traditional vessel forms at the same time. But my goal is not repeat or replicate the tradition. My goal is to move forward from the tradition. So in this piece, you can see a mapping vase, kind of like Tao mentioned, on the left, the column. So this suggests a tradition of the Chinese porcelain, but I put it into a more contemporary and abstract sculptural form. So when you see on the right side, the right column, the green one, so it looks like a vessel form, but start to evolute, so already start to change. So still on the top is round, on the bottom is a square, and kind of the V neck, but just separate the piece, put on the top, still suggests a vessel form, but it's already different from the mapping vase on the left. So that's why my ideas kind of move from the tradition connected with the contemporary concept. So that's why, so when you see the middle column in the center, so there's no traditional mapping vase, there's no kind of in between, it's totally become abstract. So it's the whole thing kind of from the tradition and to the contemporary to right now. And so that's how I finished this 3-column piece. And so when we see the porcelain piece, it's more related to the old history of Chinese porcelain. But when our eyes move into the stainless steel, we can see our own reflection. We can feel here and now. So there is a dialogue between the past and the present. I feel is more interesting for the piece. That's how I get this finished together.
Bob, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
I also want to just add one thing, because when I look at it, I see the relationship plays a major role here. Because when they stand as group, actually I see you can call it a family.
Yeah.
You have a father, mother, and maybe the child. And this kind of, you look into each other, you find, we discover that relationship. So that's why I see this like called grouping is interesting, because it does kind of remind us we actually creating, every moment we're creating a relationship among ourselves, between people, and between the world and the people. So it's to me that kind of interaction and the construction of relationship is very important. So that's why I think when I acquired the piece, I told Hongwei, said that we want a group. I'm not, I mean, of course, some people may just want one single piece, but I said I really like the idea of having a group. Okay, yeah, Hongwei.
Yeah, I mean, it's great comments. Thank you.
Let's move on briefly because there are, just as a reference point, a number of these single column pieces. So as I said, those are the soloists and these are the families or the trios. We're moving on to some sort of during COVID beginnings and thinking. And I thought it would be nice, in fact, interesting for people to see how Hongwei begins to think about and how we end up eventually with some of the most recent pieces. So Hongwei, you want to speak briefly about this? And then Bob, I'd like you to speak about the finished pieces.
Yeah, this piece, happened, I think the end of 2019, or and then I drove back, from California to New York. When I crossed Arizona, I saw, the big, cactus. No, it's different from I saw from the movie. So I really saw the cactus in person. The scale, the height, really, make me, excited. And so I thought I need to create a sculpture related to that feeling. But I mean, I call this work, finally, I called Beyond the Height. I mean, it's not making me shocked by the physical height, but it's on emotional and spiritual level. So that's how I started to make clay studies. And then I made a lot of drawings, thought about how to finish the piece. I didn't want to weld them together because there will be, the welded dots. You couldn't clean them off. So I thought about how to work on the inside the structures to connect them, interlock different parts. So on the right, that's my thought, process. So that's how I started to make. I made so many of those small studies. And finally, I fired them. It's by clay, and hundreds of drawings, and I select the, the interesting ones, and finally, finish the piece in real. And I did made use foam to make the life-size studies to really feel the scale of the piece, and then finally finished by the ceramic shards combined with stainless steel. You will see the slides probably later, right?
Yeah, so let's move on to the next slide, please. So that certainly portrays the number of the shards, and you preparing to add some more shards, it looks like. And then the other is when you're dealing with the shapes themselves on the right. And now let's look at the finished piece that's actually put together in the gallery, thanks to you and to Ian. This was not exactly your easiest install, I would say, not our easiest install for sure. And Bob, I'd like for you just, if you wouldn't mind, just responding to this piece. It's a beautiful photograph of it too.
It's a beautiful photograph of a beautiful sculpture. And technically, this brings together the stainless steel, but it also brings together the yellow glaze with the blue crystalline design elements, as well as the green glaze with the crystalline design elements there. Of course, it is a very balanced, not to say bilaterally symmetrical, but at the same time, completely balanced, which certainly was one of the goals. And one thing that's another thing that's very interesting. Earlier on, Bernie, you asked about the connection between some of the vessel shapes and the sculptures. Are the vessels actually sculptures? And what you see in looking at this is that, of course, the vertical shapes are very much the Mei Ping shape that we have seen before, with the broad shoulders, the narrow base. Of course, the Mei Ping shape has a mouth and a little vertical neck, whereas these simply have a domed top. But it's basically the Mei Ping shape that's been modified. But when you look at some of the horizontally oriented elements, just under the Mei Ping, the two Mei Ping vessels at the top, in a sense, those are modified Mei Ping shapes, a little more elliptical, rather than strictly ovoid, like the Mei Ping, but probably inspired by the Mei Ping, but horizontally oriented. So that in terms of balance, it's not only a structural balance, so that the piece stands upright, but there is an internal balance of the shapes echoing each other, some vertical, some horizontal, and then the small ones on the in the lower half of the piece also relate to those Mei Ping shapes. And of course, it's very interesting. Instead of just using solid pieces of porcelain that have been capped or framed at the bottom with stainless steel, to have the middle section be shards or fragments, pots that have been broken and then attached with metal screws, presumably attached to a stainless steel mesh underneath, so that they can be put together. But it enlivens the shape to have all of the edges of the various ceramic fragments, and then almost like staccato notes in music to have the heads of the screws holding the fragments in place. And so it's a very harmonious whole. Absolutely fascinating the way it's put together, the way it's designed, and the way it indeed is so balanced.
Beautifully said. Next slide, and Andrew, there's a small detail of it. Would you like to respond to this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, here you can see how those ceramic shards create a kind of mosaic that is, in general, from a distance, gives the impression of a single color, but of course, each shade and each even shades within particular shards differ slightly. So it adds a dynamic element to the stainless steel. It's also interesting in our current concerns with the environment and how the overuse of resources has impacted life throughout the world. That Hongwei is recycling or reusing pieces that were misfired, that couldn't be used, and is bringing them back to life in to create a whole to create a different type of beauty and a different impression through his pieces, and that's something that, again, you know, is extremely innovative. In the Japanese tradition, there is the reuse of ceramics and the repair of ceramics, but not so much the recreation of new pieces through the fragments of old pieces, which is really what's happening here. So it's really quite an amazing innovation on Hongwei's part.
We're going to look at the last two slides. First, I think, images from the Long Museum exhibition, Hongwei, is that correct, in Shanghai, to give a sense of scale. The one on the left with the young person walking and the Zhuan piece, and then the one on the right with the monumental egg form, and then the two hanging pieces in the background. And then finally, let's look at this last Zhuan piece, which is in the exhibition, and sort of each of us respond to it as we would like, starting with Tao, please.
Right. This is what I think the form started from his early series. This called Xuan. Yeah, Xuan is also means mysterious and suspended. And then now I think he really used the idea. Actually, this using reuse of fragments. I remember actually he did it in probably 2015. One of his major works, like started using this shards, broken fragments. And at that time, I was a little bit kind of not quite convinced. I said, yeah, you got the idea, but the form he put onto different arms, turning around. And I just thought visually that is too spread out. So now I think he really find the best form for this concept, rebirth. And then it's also, I think, after now it's almost 10 years, particularly in last 4 years during the COVID, kind of we start to rethink a lot of ourselves, our society, and our natural resource. I think that's to me, this is like something eventually find its best form for this concept, rebirth. And then that's the spirit we really need, desperate need for the survival of our society, of our humanities in a way. So that's my thought. I think it's
very beautiful thought.
Piece.
Andrew?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of turn this back to Li Hongwei. As your work has become larger in scale, you've had to face not only sort of artistic and aesthetic and design sort of challenges, but also logistical and even engineering related challenges. How have you dealt with those? Have you used consultants, or have you had to study engineering to get some of these large pieces actually made, or how did you do it?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. For those, could we just get back to the image, the last image? Yeah, so I made all those big pieces. I and my assistant been working together, so looks simple outside, but there's very complicated inside structure to support the whole piece. I still now working with the architect and the engineer, about the material, the size of the stainless steel, the number, the specific, the numbers of the material, because once it's getting large, I have to think about it in an architectural way. And the safety first, I have to solve the safety issues, and for the piece, the weight, everything. So I need collaborate with architect and engineering to work with the inside structure. But now those problems solved. So right now, I'm on my way to create larger the new work.
Thank you.
Thank you much. And Bob, as we come to a close with this mysterious piece, let's go to the final one again, Caroline, if we can. Thank you. Your final thoughts, and then I have one more comment, and we're on the road.
Well, I think all of the previous comments are wonderful, of rebirth, using shards and fragments and giving them a new life by incorporating them into a brand new work. They are beautiful. But another thing that strikes me that's very, very innovative is Hongwei's use of stainless steel. ever since stainless steel was invented, and I'm not sure exactly when that was, I suppose early 20th century, we have stainless steel around us all the time in our kitchens, pots and pans and things like that. And of course, metal has been used in art, whether it's bronze in early times or later, sometimes gold, silver, things like that. The Europeans love to finish certain Chinese porcelains or even Japanese porcelains, particularly in the 17th, 18th centuries, with a gold or ormolu mount for it. But I think this is one of the few times that we have seen stainless steel brought into the fine arts. I think of, oh dear, senior moment, I can't think of the artist's name, but you will all know it and you can help me out. The famous bean in the park there by the Chicago Art Institute.
Kapoor, Anish Kapoor.
Yes, yes. And so you have that as a wonderful example of use of stainless steel. It's reflective. People like the shape. People love going up and going under the work of art, as you could walk under a very large piece like this, as we saw in the Long Museum in Shanghai. You can interact with it in a very different way from most of the works of art that we interact with, whether in a gallery, in a museum, or in someone's home, if they could accommodate a hanging piece like this. But the use of stainless steel, we see it in the famous bean in Chicago. We see it in the works of Wang, also from Beijing, a Chinese artist who loves to make stainless steel scholars rocks. And now we see Hongwei using the stainless steel material in a very creative way, a very wonderful way, in combination with porcelain. And I think the stainless steel, because Hongwei polishes it so highly, it becomes very beautiful in its own right. At first glance, it looks like highly polished silver, but because of its reflective nature, it's people engage with it in a wonderful way. So that I think just the choice of material and then the mastery in the use of the stainless steel is also quite a wonderful thing.
Wonderful. Hongwei, do you have a final comment? And then I have one closing remark.
I'm good. I'm all set. Thank you. Thank you all. Yeah.
Then let me just share with you, we all share a creative goal with art. The goal is difficult. It is an invitation to change the world. And that was going back to essentially what Tao was saying about Hongwei's art enabling us to feel somehow the energy and the goal of preserving and saving this world. And then to Brother Thomas's final quote, the consciousness of the beautiful will save the world. Certainly the work itself is beautiful. And in being aware of it, let's hope that that enables us individually and as a group of people to do our best to save the world. Thank you all so much. What an extraordinary compliment to the work. What an extraordinary sharing of ideas, Hongwei. If I were you, and since I can't do any of the art, I would be stimulated to make even more wonderful pieces than you have, with this good energy flowing to you as a result of what you have created. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.